Howdy everyone, it's Bob here. I know it has been quite a while since I've made a video. 2019 has not been a kind year to me. I have been very, very busy, and it's still not over yet. And yet, despite all of this, I've managed to find some time the other day to go over to the movies and watch Joker, which is not a film I was originally planning on seeing, but there's just been a lot of talk, a lot of controversy, a lot of mixed feelings. Some people think it's brilliant. Some people think it's just overrated trash. And I just had to go see it so I could formulate an opinion for myself. Now, before I begin, I want to go ahead and mention that I'm going to do my best to keep this spoiler-free. I might have to kind of lean over into like spoiler-ish territories in order to make some points. But if I do that, I'll do my best to kind of keep the details vague. I'm kind of speaking off the cuff here. I don't have like a script prepared, so I'm just kind of just saying everything as I go. So yeah, I'll try my best to keep spoilers out of here. I'll mention things you've probably seen in trailers and other promotional materials. But yeah, that's it. Moving on, my consensus after seeing the film, I saw it just a couple days ago. I wanted another day to kind of formulate my opinions before I made a video. But my opinions are, it is a good film. I don't know if I can bring myself to say it is quite as good as a lot of people are saying, but I do think it's a good film. One of the first impressions I got from it after having seen the film and it was over was that it was a film that leans very heavily on its influences. It definitely wears its influences on its sleeve, sometimes to a fault. It is very evocative of a lot of other similar films that deal with the subject matter of, it's a character study of a mentally deranged person who gradually unravels as the film goes on, and is desperate for either some kind of validation or retribution against a society that they feel has slighted them. We're talking movies like Fight Club, we're talking movies like Falling Down, 1 Hour Photo, Taxi Driver, a lot of Taxi Driver in this film. And if there's one film that I think it leans heavily on the most, it's another Martin Scorsese film that stars Robert De Niro, and that is The King of Comedy. For anyone out there who has not seen The King of Comedy, it is a 1983 film starring Robert De Niro and Jerry Lewis. And in that film, Robert De Niro plays a struggling comedian who is mentally deranged, frequently retreats into his imagination in order to kind of seek validation. He lives with his mom, and he's trying to he wants to have this relationship with this woman who is like way out of his league, and all the while he views his goal, his goal to break into the entertainment industry and achieve the success he always wanted. He does that by trying to sort of appeal to a popular late-night talk show host. And that is most of Joker. It really kind of feels like director Todd Phillips just kind of saw The King of Comedy and thought to himself, yeah, let's remake this, but like make it darker and a lot more violent. And while it's certainly a good film, the fact that it relies so heavily on its influences kind of made it easy to see where a lot of things were going. So there were a few twists and turns that I was able to that didn't really surprise me. For an example, there's I guess you could call it a subplot in the film involving Arthur Fleck, who's played by Joaquin Phoenix, and Zazie Beetz' character. I can't remember her name, but they have kind of a romance subplot. And there's a reveal about a little more than halfway into the film in regards to that relationship that I couldn't say I saw coming because I wasn't concentrating that much on that aspect of the story. But I will say that when the reveal did happen, it was one of those moments where it felt like it made sense to me, because there was some aspects of that plot that I found to be a bit preposterous. and it certainly cleared it up, but I can't say it was something that really impressed me that much, even though I didn't see it coming. There's a few preposterous moments in the film. There was one, you've probably seen clips of it in the trailer, where Arthur is on a subway train, and he is being harassed by a trio of high society douchebags. Is the best way I could put it. And the whole setup to it feels really preposterous because, first off, if these guys were as rich as they were, they wouldn't be down in this grimy-looking subway. And even if they were, if they saw someone like Arthur Fleck on the other end of the car, laughing maniacally dressed as a clown, you wouldn't pick a fight. I don't care if you got your boys with you or not. The first rule about dealing with scary clowns is that you do not engage ever, and the fact that they would just walk up to him and try to harass him it just felt a little preposterous to me. I keep saying that word, but it's the best word I can come up with to describe my feelings for it. Another one of the things that the film did that I have mixed feelings on is how we're constantly, well, not constantly, but we're often seeing things through the lens of Arthur's imagination, and sometimes it's really easy. There's a scene very early in the film where he's imagining he's at I can't remember the character's name. I think it's Murray, Robert De Niro's character. He imagined he's at his late night show, and for some reason Murray just kind of points him out from the crowd and says, "Hey, who are you? Come on down here. Boy, you sure are someone special. Everyone give Arthur a round of applause." It's really silly. It's totally absurd, and it's easy to figure out early into the sequence that it's all going on in his imagination. But it's not the only scene that's like that. There's a few other moments in the film that do that as well, and because of this, I found myself constantly second-guessing what I was watching. There's a lot of very profound and powerful moments in the film, and yet despite this, I'm always wondering whether or not I'm watching something that has any major consequence in regards to the story. I'm wondering at some points whether or not anything in the film actually happened in the real world, or as in, the movie world rather, and not just in Arthur's imagination. And it's constantly keeping me guessing, which is kind of neat, kind of keeps the audience on its toes, but it's also frustrating because I'm trying to figure out, what really did happen, what didn't, and I just found that a little frustrating. Maybe if I go back and watch it again, it will click a little better and I'll have an easier time figuring out, but it was a tad bit frustrating. There's one thing that I found really weird, I don't know why, but it seems like director Todd Phillips, he really, really likes shooting scenes of Joaquin Phoenix dancing. I don't know why. There's so many scenes where he's dancing in different ways. He's dancing in like a bathroom. He's dancing at his house. He's just, dancing out, doing his job, or in the street or whatever. It's just, there's a lot of scenes of Joaquin Phoenix just dancing by himself, and boy, do we get a lot of it. And don't get it wrong, they're beautifully shot. Joaquin Phoenix does a great job. They fit well into the movie, but there's a lot of them, and it feels a little gratuitous. It almost kind of got funny at some points. But they did make for some good scenes. It's just I was a little surprised that there was as many of them as there were. But yeah, that's really the extent of my major criticisms with the film. On the whole, I thought it was a very satisfying film. First off, got to hand it to Joaquin Phoenix. He pretty much steals the show. Even if you disagree with me, even if you don't like this film, I think you would have to agree with me when I say that he is easily the best part of this movie. He just absolutely kills it. He goes for broke for this performance, and he nails it. He really did a great job of making a character that feels a little sympathetic, but also kind of menacing at the same time. And watching him unravel as the film goes on is just fascinating. Of course, the rest of the cast is brilliant. Robert De Niro is great as always. Zazie Beetz, she only gets a few scenes, but she does well in all of them. Frances Conroy, she plays Arthur's mother. Again, she also has a few scenes, but she also does very well. It's just a very strong cast, but it's really Joaquin Phoenix who steals the show, and it's partially because I don't think there's a single scene in the film that he's not in. He pretty much monopolizes the movie, which is alright because he's just so damn good. And it is fascinating to watch the character develop as the film goes on. When we first meet Arthur at the beginning of the film, he does not come off as a dangerous person, at least not a danger to anyone other than himself. He's certainly a bit creepy when we learn about his condition that causes him to laugh maniacally, often without any real provocation. But he even says early in the film that he doesn't like violence, he doesn't like guns, and yet after a scene right at the beginning of the film, you've probably seen it in the trailers, where he gets mugged by a gang of teenagers, he gets pressured into carrying a gun with him, which is very much so something he shouldn't do, because he's clearly touched in the head. Someone like him should not have access to firearms. But it's just one of those little moments that kind of pushes him over the edge. And as we go on, there's more and more. It's not just like, oh, he gets a gun and now he thinks he's God. Though he does have a few creepy moments where he's sort of revels in having the power that the firearm gives him. There's moments where we find out that he's on like a social service program that provides him with medications that allow him to kind of function. He has a job. It doesn't seem like it's a very flattering or high-paying job, but it gives him balance. It allows him to sort of center himself. But as the film progresses, these things become jeopardized. He finds out that the government is cutting the program that provides him with his necessary medication. His employment comes at risk at one point. And as this all happens, he just descends further and further into this pit of madness. And he just delivers it so well. And part of it also comes from how the movie is filmed. It is a gorgeously shot picture. I've never seen piles of garbage on the street look so beautiful, but it does look great. The shot compositions, the lighting, the way it's edited, it's all just, it feels like a film that's very carefully crafted by people who know filmmaking, who understand filmmaking. And I just loved it. That it's definitely, the performance and the cinematography really are the high points of this film. Another thing I wasn't expecting was this film to be a little bit about class struggle, which kind of caught me off guard. It's not just because, he finds out that the rich government, high society government of Gotham City is stripping away his social service programs that give him his medicine. But we learned that there's a big strike going on in Gotham City with the trash collectors. That's why there's garbage piling up in the streets. There's a lot of frustrations with conflicts between the working class and the wealthy. Thomas Wayne, I think he's played by Brett Cullen. He typically in a lot of Batman-themed media, whenever we see Batman's father, or Bruce Wayne's father, rather, he's usually viewed as a very kind man who's sympathetic to the plight of working class people, but that is not how he is in this film. In this film, he is just another rich, tone-deaf douchebag who thinks all of these people are just mad because they're jealous of how successful the rich are, which of course is just beyond stupid. It just shows that he has no idea what's really going on. And that was interesting to see that twist, how they kind of took that character and kind of just did a 180 with it and make him seem kind of a villain, really. Which is just fascinating. There's no real heroes in this movie. It's just a bunch of very angry people who just don't understand. going at each other's throats, and it's terrifying. It was also interesting because there's a little bit of allusions to some real world politics. There's a lot of controversy when this film came out, saying like, oh, it's gonna inspire incels or whatever to shoot up movie theaters or some stupid crap. I don't know. That wasn't the impression I got, but there was some little allusions to things like there's a point where the Joker, or rather the image of the Joker, gets co-opted by the people of Gotham as a symbol for resistance against the 1%. And you start seeing people going around wearing like clown masks and everything. And there's like a scene where we see Arthur just walking down the street and some guy with a clown mask drives by and he kind of like smiles at him like he understands. Kind of reminds me of how other seemingly harmless images get kind of co-opted by like the alt-right. Like, you know, Pepe the Frog, or like the OK hand symbol, and now how it means something else. I also feel like there was an interesting point made at the end of the film about how easy it is for an angry and neglected society to throw their support behind someone who is truly just deranged and does not act with reason, and make them like a champion of their cause, simply because they're effective at framing themselves as such. I think there's a fairly obvious parallel being made there to modern American society. I'm not going to spell it out for you. I like to imagine my viewers as being intelligent enough to figure it out on their own. But that was something interesting I didn't expect. I wouldn't say this film is like the most brilliant piece of social commentary I've ever seen, but it's certainly not bad social commentary. I saw where they were going with it, and I liked how they went about doing it. It didn't feel like it was really knocking, you know, the audience over the head with its with the parallels it was making. You know, it's not like James Cameron's Avatar, where we got like the villain, you know, marching around going, you know, we don't negotiate with terrorists. You know, it's like, okay, yeah, I got you, James. You're talking about Bush, you're talking about the Iraq War. You know, I got you. You know, brilliant subtext is brilliant. But yeah, I was impressed. I did not expect a film with a social commentary. It wasn't heavy on the social commentary. It's definitely a lot more of a character study than it is a film about socio-political issues. But yeah, it was not something I anticipated, and I was delightfully surprised to see that. Also, I don't know why I'm bringing this up now. I probably should have mentioned this earlier. Like I said, I'm not scripting any of this. I'm kind of just talking off the cuff here. This is one of the criticisms I had. There's a bit of a controversy going on. There's a lot of controversies going on with this film. Most of them are just, you know, ridiculous and unfounded. But there is one genuine controversy, I feel, regarding a decision to include a certain piece of music in one of the scenes of the film. There's a scene in the film, you've probably seen it in the trailers too, that comes very late in the film, after Arthur kind of makes the official transformation from Arthur to Joker, and he has this moment where he kind of dances down a flight of stairs. We see the stairs a number of times in the film, but it seems like every time we see him, he's usually going up them at night, and in this scene, he's kind of going down them during the daytime to kind of show the sort of kind of draw the differences, the contrast between where he was before and where he is now. And during this scene, they play the song Rock and Roll Part 2 by Gary Glitter, who, as you may know, is a menacing convicted pedophile. And he's likely to get royalties from this film because of its inclusion. And there's some controversy surrounding that, and I can sympathize with that. What was interesting was that I've heard of Gary Glitter before going into this film, and I know he made a song called Rock and Roll Part 2, but I never went out of my way to go and listen to it because, because I didn't want to feel like I was, supporting Gary Glitter and his very all the inappropriate things he does. So I always kind of avoided it, and I remember hearing that it was going to be in this film during that particular scene. So when that scene was coming up, I was kind of bracing myself to hear or at least what I thought was to hear this song for the first time. And imagine my shock when I learned that Rock and Roll Part 2 was the Hey song that they usually play as like a sports anthem. And I was like, wait a minute, that can't be the song. I hear that song like all the time at like sporting events. They like do it at like hockey games and stuff. It's like, oh, maybe they went and changed the song at the last minute, because there's no way that could be Gary Glitter. Yep, but no, that was Gary Glitter. That was his song. I never knew that was what Rock and Roll Part 2 was, so I kind of, that was an interesting revelation for me. So, kind of hard to go back and listen to that song now, but, I mean, I never knew what the song was called before. I always knew it as the song that goes, hey, and they play it at sporting events all the time, so... that was interesting. But yeah, I do agree with the criticisms. I understand why that piece was chosen, because it is in poor taste and it is kind of tone deaf, but it kind of matches the scene because Arthur's kind of dancing. Of course, he's dancing. Like, again, you know, Joaquin Phoenix loves dancing in this movie, and to kind of like celebrate him having finally made the full 100% transformation from Arthur to Joker. And the thing about Arthur is that he wants to be funny. He's trying to be funny. He wants to be a comedian, but he can't do it because he doesn't understand comedy. There's like scenes where he's like at a comedy show and he's like taking notes, but he's not laughing when everyone else is. He always laughs during the setup and never the punchline, and he's like taking notes, but the notes aren't really helpful. He's writing down like, oh, talk about sex. People find sexy stuff funny, and it's like, he's not quite understanding comedy. So for him to celebrate his transformation into this very maniacal character by dancing to the song by a person who is very kind of disgusting and villainous himself, tonally it makes sense. Like, yeah, okay, I get it. That's actually pretty clever, a very clever decision to use that music. But then again, I still would decide against it just because it's irresponsible, because putting that song in the movie and allowing him to profit off of it is kind of just irresponsible and dangerous. I mean, last I checked, I think he's still in prison. And even if he got out now, I think he's like older than dirt. But yeah, I still would have decided against it. I mean, I know why they chose it, and it works, but I still would have decided against it. I'm sure there's more I would like to say about this film. There is one more thing I want to say. It is technically a DC movie. It doesn't take place in like the DC extended universe. I think they took that plan and took it behind the shed and shot and buried it, which is probably for the best. I think the only good thing that came out of that was the Wonder Woman movie, and even then that film was just like okay, I think. But yeah, it is technically a DC movie. It takes place in the Batman universe, but the thing is, it's very, very loosely rooted in the DC universe. Like, yeah, it takes place in Gotham City, and we hear talk about like the Wayne family and stuff, but that's really the extent of it. It really could have felt like, this movie was probably originally written as something else completely unrelated to the DC universe and all of the other properties associated with it. But then it got approved, and they went back and I guess retrofitted the script so that it would work. But yeah, so it's very loosely rooted, and I kind of appreciate that. It kind of allows it to stand alone as its own thing instead of relying heavily on, Batman and everything. There are some moments where we see characters that I didn't expect to see in this film that are part of the Batman mythos, but we don't see them very often. And there is a moment near the end of the film where they kind of tie the movie into the Batman mythos. I won't go into it here. It kind of made sense given the social commentary that's being made by the film. I still didn't think it was necessary. It wasn't bad, but I did sort of see where they were going with it. It didn't kind of surprise me how they did it. It was a very obvious way they did it. But and I didn't think it was necessary. I think they could have just they could have done without it. But still impressed. Good film. This video is getting long, way longer than I thought. But yeah, final consensus. Good film. Not quite as good as a lot of people are saying. It does kind of rely a little bit too heavily on its influences. It does kind of gimp a lot. And I do mean a lot from the King of Comedy. It's like at least 50% the King of Comedy. But I will say, as far as character studies go, it was very good. I was impressed by it. I would definitely recommend it. Not to everyone. Definitely don't take the kids to see this. This is a pretty violent film. It's not like, guts and everything everywhere, but when it gets violent in a way that feels very real, like it's grounded in reality. Everything in this film just feels like something that could truly happen, which is part of what makes it truly scary. That's what makes it a truly frightening film. It's not a comedy. There's like maybe 2 or 3 moments where Arthur says or does something that's actually funny, but it always happens at like the most horribly inappropriate moment, so it takes all the energy out of the joke, or the moment rather, which is, works tonally in the film. But yeah, that's it. I'm kind of rambling now. Final consensus, good film, recommend it. And that's it. I'll go ahead and end the video here. If you have any thoughts or feelings on the film, let me know down in the comment section. I love talking with you. Getting comments from people is my favorite thing. And that'll just about do it. Y'all be good to each other, and I will see you in the next video.